John Carter looked up at the night sky as he set up his tent in a small clearing. The stars shone brightly over the Appalachian Trail. After 15 years as a Marine, he found peace in these solo hiking trips. The mountains were quiet tonight, too quiet. No crickets chirped, no owls hooted. Just silence. A bright blue light suddenly cut through the darkness. John shielded his eyes and reached for his hunting knife. The light grew stronger, washing over the trees and rocks around him. His skin prickled with goosebumps. This wasn't normal. What the hell? He whispered as the ground beneath him began to vibrate. The light now formed a perfect circle above him. John tried to run, but his legs wouldn't move. A strange force held him in place. Panic rose in his chest as he felt his body lift off the ground. The trees grew smaller below him. He opened his mouth to yell, but no sound came out. John blacked out. When he opened his eyes, the first thing he noticed was the cold. He lay on a hard metal floor in a small glass box. His backpack, knife, and other gear were gone. John stood up carefully and pressed his hands against the clear walls. In similar boxes around him, strange creatures of all shapes and sizes moved about. Some had scales, others fur. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4 or more. A tall figure approached his box. It walked on 2 legs but looked nothing like a human. Its skin was pale blue with small scales that caught the light. It had 4 arms and a long neck that supported a narrow head with 6 small black eyes. The creature wore what looked like armor made of a shiny black material. "Specimen H-17 is awake," said the creature in a clicking voice that somehow became English in John's ears. John realized some kind of translator must be working. "Where am I? Who are you?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The alien looked at a thin, clear tablet in one of its 4 hands. "It speaks. Basic communication skills." It made notes without answering John. "I ask you a question," John said louder, banging his fist against the glass. The alien's eyes blinked one after another in a wave. "It shows aggression. Interesting for a prey species." Another alien joined the first. This one wore red armor with strange symbols. "Is this the Earth specimen, Kruzul?" it asked. "Yes, Commander Vexlar. One of the bipedal mammals from the 3rd planet. They call themselves humans. No natural weapons, thin skin, limited strength. But they use tools. Might provide some sport for the younger warriors." John listened carefully. Sport. Warriors. The situation became clearer and more terrifying. These aliens, these Vexteri as they seemed to be called, had collected him like some animal for a hunt. The commander studied John. "This one is larger than the female specimens. Good muscle tone. It might last longer in the arena." "I can hear you," John said. "And I'm not an it. My name is John Carter." Both aliens turned to him with what seemed like surprise. "Self-awareness and pride," noted Kruzul. The previous specimens showed similar traits, fascinating but ultimately useless in improving survival. Commander Vexlar made a sound like stones grinding together. John realized it was laughter. "Prepare it for assessment," ordered Vexlar. "The young ones need practice before the main hunt next cycle." As they walked away, a gas began to fill John's container. He held his breath and searched for any weakness in his prison, but found none. Eventually, he had to breathe. The sweet-smelling gas made his limbs heavy and his mind foggy. Before he passed out again, John made a promise to himself. These aliens thought he was easy prey. They thought humans were weak. He would show them how wrong they were. They had no idea what they had just caught. John's last thought before darkness took him was simple. The hunters were about to become the hunted. John woke up with dirt under his fingers. Real dirt. He sat up quickly and looked around. Trees, grass, and a small stream nearby. For a moment, he thought he was back on Earth. Then he noticed the sky. It wasn't blue, but a pale green with 2 small suns. He stood up, checking himself. The aliens had dressed him in a simple gray outfit. No pockets, no tools. Just thin fabric covering his body. At least they hadn't taken his boots. A rustling sound came from behind a large rock. John grabbed a stick from the ground and moved silently toward the noise. Years of combat training kept his footsteps light. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," said a woman's voice. "Those sticks break easily. The rocks work better." A slim woman with short blonde hair stepped out. She wore the same gray outfit as John. "You're human," John said, lowering his makeshift weapon. "Last time I checked." She gave a small smile. "I'm Susan Miller. Been here for about 3 weeks, I think. Hard to tell time in this place." John Carter, Marine, grabbed me while I was hiking. He looked around. "What is this place? It looks like Earth, but it's not. It's some kind of arena. The bug-eyed freaks put us here to hunt us." Susan picked up a sharp rock. "They give us just enough to survive. Water, some fruit-like things that grow on those trees. Then they send in their youngsters to track us down." John studied the area more carefully. The forest seemed to extend about half a mile in each direction before hitting large glass walls. Above, some kind of clear dome let in the light from the alien suns. "Have you seen others? Other humans?" he asked. Susan's face darkened. "There were 2 others when I arrived. They didn't make it past the first hunt." She showed John a scar on her arm. "I've survived 3 hunts so far. I'm fast, and I know how to hide." John nodded. "We need more than hiding. We need weapons, traps." "Are you crazy? These aliens are twice our size with 4 arms and technology we can't even understand. Every predator has weaknesses," John replied. "I watched them. They're overconfident. They think we're just scared animals." Susan studied him for a moment. "You really think we can fight back?" "I know we can." John started gathering more sticks and vines. "First, we need better weapons than rocks. Show me where the water and food are. We need to secure resources." Over the next few hours, Susan led John through the artificial forest. They collected sharp stones, flexible branches, and vines strong enough to use as rope. John began fashioning a spear, hardening the tip in a small fire they made. "The Vex Terry will be watching," Susan warned, looking up at the dome. "Good," John replied. "Let them watch." By nightfall, they had built a small shelter high in a tree. John had made 2 spears, a knife from a sharp stone, and started work on several simple traps. "Look there," Susan whispered, pointing to a small red light moving along the dome ceiling. "Camera drone," John said. "They're studying us." In the control room of the station, Krauzol watched the screens with interest. "Commander, the new human specimen is behaving unusually. It's making tools." Commander Vexlar approached. "Many species try to arm themselves. It makes the hunt more interesting. But this one is different. It's not just reacting. It's planning. Look at those structures. Those aren't just tools, they're traps." Vexlar's 6 eyes blinked in sequence. "Then we shall give it a worthy challenge. Prepare 3 of our young warriors. Make the announcement for tomorrow's hunt." Krauzol looked at the screens again. "The human doesn't run or hide like the others. It watches. It waits. Then it will die bravely," Vexlar said. "Begin the preparations." Back in the arena, John looked up at the camera drone and smiled. The hunt would begin soon, but this time, the prey was ready. A loud horn echoed through the arena. John and Susan looked up from their camp. "They're coming," Susan whispered. "We should split up. It's harder for them to track 2 targets." John shook his head. "No, we stay together. 2 sets of eyes, 2 sets of hands." The horn sounded again. Through the trees, a section of the wall slid open. 3 tall Vexteri warriors stepped into the arena. Each wore light armor and carried what looked like spears with glowing tips. Their blue-scaled skin reflected the morning light. "Those are the young ones," Susan explained. "They hunt in packs to learn. The adults are much worse." John nodded and checked his makeshift weapons. Remember the plan. Lead them to the first trap, then circle back to the stream. The Vexteri spread out, moving with confidence through the trees. Their long legs covered ground quickly. One of them held up a small device that blinked faster as it pointed in John and Susan's direction. "They can track our body heat," Susan said. "We need to move." John grabbed their supplies and they slipped away from their camp. They moved quietly through the dense foliage toward the area where John had set his traps. From high above, viewers watched on large screens. Hundreds of Vexteri gathered to see the hunt. Some placed bets on how long the humans would last. "The female has survived 3 hunts," one observer noted. "But the male is new. He will be caught first." Commander Vexlar watched with interest. "Perhaps, but note how they move together. Most prey species scatter when threatened." Below, John and Susan reached a narrow path between 2 large rocks. They crossed it carefully, John stopping to adjust something on the ground. "It's ready," he whispered. "Now we need them to follow us." Susan grabbed a rock and threw it hard against a tree. The sound echoed. John did the same on the other side. The tracking devices of the Vexteri immediately turned toward the noise. "They took the bait," John said. "Now we run." They sprinted toward the stream, making no effort to hide their tracks. Behind them, the 3 Vexteri hunters converged on the path between the rocks. The lead hunter, Mactor, moved confidently. The prey is panicking. They run straight now. His companion, Dravik, pointed at footprints. "This way." They head for water. The third hunter, Selvia, paused. "They make too much noise. It could be a..." Her warning came too late. As Mactor stepped between the rocks, his foot caught a tripwire made of vine. A large log swung down from above, striking him directly in the chest. The force knocked him backwards into Dravik. In the viewing chamber, the crowd gasped. "What happened?" demanded one of the elders. Krozol zoomed in the cameras. "A trap." The human constructed a primitive but effective trap. Mactor got up slowly, his armor cracked. Green blood seeped from a wound on his chest. "The prey fights back," he hissed in anger. By the stream, John and Susan heard the commotion. "It worked," Susan said with disbelief. "1 down, 2 to go," John replied. He pointed to the water. "Quick, into the stream. It will hide our heat signatures." They waded into the cool water, moving downstream where John had prepared another surprise. In the control room, Commander Vexlar leaned forward. "Interesting. The human uses the environment against our superior technology." Krozol looked concerned. "Should we stop the hunt? The warriors are young and..." "No," Vexlar interrupted. "Let them learn that prey can bite back. Increase the challenge. Flood the lower section." As John and Susan emerged from the stream, the ground began to shake. Ahead of them, water began pouring into the arena from hidden pipes. "They're changing the rules," Susan said fearfully. John gripped his spear tighter. "Then so will we." Water rushed into the lower part of the arena. John and Susan climbed to higher ground, the cold water nipping at their heels. "They're trying to flush us out," John said, scanning the trees above them. A loud roar came from their right. Through the rising water, a large creature with 6 legs and sharp teeth splashed toward them. Its scaly body glistened wet in the light. "They released the predators," Susan gasped. "They do this when the hunt takes too long." John grabbed Susan's arm and pulled her up a steep slope. The creature followed, its claws digging into the soft dirt for traction. It was gaining on them. "There," John pointed to a narrow space between 2 large boulders. "Go through." "It's too big to follow." Susan squeezed through the gap. John followed, but not before grabbing a jagged rock. As the creature lunged, John struck hard at its snout. It howled in pain and backed away. On the other side, they found themselves in a small clearing with tall grass. In the middle, a reptilian being with green scales and 4 eyes cowered. One of its legs was caught in a metal trap similar to the ones the Vexteri used. Another prisoner, Susan whispered. The alien looked up in fear, making clicking sounds with its mouth. It tried to back away but winced in pain. It's trapped, John said. He approached slowly, hands raised to show he meant no harm. The alien hissed, showing sharp teeth. John stopped and pointed to the trap, then made a motion like opening it. The alien watched him carefully, then nodded. John knelt by the trap. It was complex, but he could see how the spring mechanism worked. He pressed down on the main plate, and the jaws opened. The alien quickly pulled its injured leg free. "We should go," Susan urged. "The hunters will be here soon." The alien stood, testing its injured leg. It was taller than John, with powerful arms and a long tail. It made more clicking sounds, then touched its chest. "Zictel," it said clearly. "It's telling us its name," John realized. He touched his own chest. "John." Then he pointed to Susan. "Susan." Zictel repeated their names, then pointed in the direction they had come from, and made a slashing motion across its throat. "I think it's warning us about the hunters," Susan said. John nodded. "We need to move." "Can you walk?" he asked Zictel, miming walking with his fingers. Zictel nodded and gestured for them to follow. It led them through the tall grass to a hidden entrance in the rock face. Inside was a small cave where two other alien creatures huddled. "More prisoners," Susan whispered. Zictel spoke to the others in clicking sounds. They looked at the humans with a mixture of fear and curiosity. One of them, a small furry being with 6 arms, approached John. It held out a strange fruit. "I think it's saying thank you," Susan said as John accepted the gift. In the control room, Krauzol watched the screens with growing concern. "Commander, the human has made contact with other specimens. They appear to be cooperating." Commander Vexlar studied the images. "This has never happened before. Different species working together. The human initiated it by freeing the Gractor from our trap. Now they share a hiding place." Vexlar's eyes narrowed. "This changes things. The prey are learning from each other." Back in the cave, John was drawing in the dirt with a stick. He made simple pictures showing the Vexteri hunters and different parts of the arena. Zictel and the others watched intently. "What are you doing?" Susan asked. "Making a plan," John replied. "The Vexteri think we're just scared animals. But we can work together. We can fight back." Zictel made a sound that seemed like agreement. It picked up a stick and added to John's drawing, showing what looked like hidden passages through the arena. "I think we just found our edge," John said with a smile. "The hunters are about to become the hunted." The 2 remaining Vexteri hunters moved carefully through the flooded section of the arena. Their tracking devices no longer showed clear signals from the humans. "They've learned to hide their heat signatures," Dravik said, adjusting his weapon. "Clever for prey." Selvia scanned the rocks ahead. "We should report back, ask for more hunters." "And show weakness," Dravik hissed. "No, the commander is watching. We finish this hunt ourselves." They passed through a narrow canyon, weapons ready. Neither noticed the slight movement in the rocks above. John signaled to Zictel, who was positioned on the opposite side of the canyon. The reptilian alien nodded and threw a large rock far to the left. It crashed loudly, echoing through the canyon. The Vexteri turned toward the noise. "There," Dravik pointed, rushing forward. As they moved, Susan pulled a hidden vine. The ground beneath the hunters gave way, revealing a pit John and the others had dug and covered with branches and leaves. Selvia jumped back just in time, but Dravik fell in with a surprised cry. "Now," John shouted. From both sides of the canyon, John's group attacked. The small furry alien, which John had learned was named Pick, threw a net made from vines over Selvia. Zictel leaped down, his powerful legs allowing him to land safely. He grabbed the Vexteri's weapon and pulled it away. In the pit, Dravik struggled to stand in the muddy bottom. John slid down, spear in hand. "You," the Vexteri hunter hissed. You are prey. You do not fight back. Looks like you've been hunting the wrong species, John replied. In the viewing chamber, the audience watched in stunned silence. What had started as a routine hunt had turned into something unprecedented. The human has organized the other specimens, Krozol said, his voice a mix of concern and fascination. They function as a coordinated unit. Commander Vexlar's eyes narrowed. Impossible. Different species do not cooperate in nature. Yet we are watching it happen, Krozol replied. Back in the arena, John's group had successfully captured both hunters. They took their weapons and communication devices. What do we do with them? Susan asked, looking at the disarmed Vexteri. We use them, John said. He turned to Selvia. Your leaders are watching. Tell them we want to talk. Selvia stared at John with hatred. Prey does not make demands. We're not prey anymore, John replied. Look around you. Your hunt has failed. Zictel had figured out how to use the Vexteri weapon. He pointed it at Selvia, making his intentions clear. Fine, Selvia said finally. Give me the communicator. John handed her the device. Selvia spoke in the clicking language of the Vexteri. After a moment, a holographic image appeared above the device. It was Commander Vexlar. What is the meaning of this? The commander demanded. John stepped forward. Your hunters have been captured. By prey. How does that fit into your worldview? Vexlar's 6 eyes blinked rapidly. You speak directly to me, human. You have courage. I have more than that, John replied. I have your hunters and their weapons, and I know how to use them. To demonstrate, John pointed the weapon at a nearby tree and fired. A beam of energy cut through the trunk, sending the tree crashing down. Impressive, Vexlar said. But you are still trapped in the arena, with nowhere to go. John smiled. For now, but I'm just getting started. He turned off the communicator and looked at his diverse group of allies. They had grown to 7 different species, all former prey who had decided to fight back. What now? Susan asked. Now, John said, looking up at the cameras watching them. We changed the rules of the game. John studied the Vexteri weapons they had captured. Unlike human guns, these fired energy beams and had no visible ammunition. Zictal had figured out how to adjust the power settings. We need to get out of this arena, John told the group. These hunters were just the beginning. They'll send more. Susan pointed to the captive Vexteri. Maybe they know how to open the doors. John approached Dravik, who sat with his back against a rock, hands bound with vines. How do we get out of here? You don't, the hunter replied. The arena is controlled from the command center. Only authorized Vexteri can open the exits. John looked at the communication device they had taken. Then we need to make them open the doors for us. The small furry alien pick made excited chittering sounds. It had been examining the control panel near one of the arena walls. Using gestures and drawings in the dirt, Pick explained that similar panels existed in its home world. These panels controlled environment systems. The environmental controls, John said, understanding. If we can hack into that, we might be able to force them to open the doors. Zictal led them to the panel. It was sealed, but one shot from the energy weapon melted the lock. Inside were complex circuits and glowing crystals. Pick chittered again, pointing at different parts. With 6 arms, it could work quickly, rearranging connections and adjusting settings. In the control room, alarms suddenly blared. What's happening? Commander Vexlar demanded. Krozol rushed to a console. They've accessed the environmental controls for Section 5. Temperature is rising rapidly. Shut it down, Vexlar ordered. I can't, Krozol replied. They've bypassed the main systems. On the screens, they watched as John's group moved away from the area where temperature was rising. Steam began to fill that section of the arena. They're creating a diversion, Vexlar realized. Send in the elite guard. Now, back in the arena, John led the group toward the main exit, while the Vexteri were distracted by the environmental crisis. The humidity sensors are overloading, Susan said, watching the steam spread. A whole system will crash soon. That's the idea, John replied. Chaos is our friend. They reached the main door just as the lights throughout the arena flickered. Emergency sirens echoed through the dome. Now pick, John said. The small alien connected the captured communication device to another panel near the door. It worked quickly, its 6 arms a blur of movement. The door shuddered, then slowly began to open. They're escaping, Krozol shouted, watching the monitors. Beyond the door was a long corridor. John led the group forward, weapons ready. They encountered 2 Vextari guards who were running toward the arena to investigate the alarms. John fired first, hitting one in the leg. Zictol tackled the other. Which way to the other holding areas? John asked the injured guard. Why would I tell you? The guard hissed. Susan pointed the energy weapon at him. Because we're not prey anymore. We're the hunters now. The guard reluctantly pointed down a side corridor. That way. But you'll never free them all. There are hundreds of specimens. Watch us, John said. They found the first holding area where dozens of different alien species were kept in glass containers, similar to where John had first awakened. Zictol used the captured weapon to break the control panel, and all the containers opened at once. At first, the freed captives cowered in fear. John stepped forward. We're breaking out, he announced. Anyone who wants freedom, come with us. One by one, the captives emerged. Some looked like insects, others like birds or reptiles. All had been hunted, all had been treated as prey. In the command center, Vexlar watched in growing anger as the monitors showed more and more containment areas being breached. Lock down the station, he ordered. No one gets to the ship bay. Krozol looked worried. Sir, the human seems to know exactly where to go. How is this possible? Vexlar slammed his fist on the console. Because we underestimated it. We thought it was just prey. Alarms blared throughout the station as John led his growing army of former captives through the corridors. They had freed over 100 different alien species, each one eager for revenge against the Vextari. We need to reach the command center, John told Susan and Zictol. That's where we can control the whole station. A group of elite Vextari guards blocked their path. These warriors wore full armor and carried larger weapons than the hunters. Stand back, Susan warned the others. The guards fired, energy beams cutting through the air. John and his group took cover behind metal barriers. Zictol fired back with their captured weapon. But they were outgunned. We need another way, John said. Pick tugged at John's sleeve, pointing to a small panel in the wall. The 6-armed alien quickly pried it open, revealing a maintenance tunnel. Good thinking, John said. He turned to the group. We'll split up. Susan, take half the group and continue the distractions. I'll take Zictol and Pick through the tunnels to the command center. Susan nodded and led her team in the opposite direction, drawing the guards away. John and his smaller team squeezed into the maintenance tunnel. In the command center, Krozol was frantically trying to restore order. We've lost control of sections 3 through 7. The security systems are failing. Commander Vexlar paced nervously. How is this possible? They're just specimens, test subjects. An elder Vextari entered the room. His robes marked him as a member of the High Council. Commander, explain this situation, he demanded. Council member Vorthal. Vexlar bowed slightly. We have a minor issue with some escaped specimens. Minor. Vorthal gestured to the screens showing chaos throughout the station. You've lost control of the entire facility because of one human. Krozol stepped forward. With respect, Council member, this human is unlike any species we've encountered. It doesn't just adapt to survive, it changes the rules. A loud boom shook the command center as the door was blown open. John, Zictol, and Pick entered, weapons aimed at the Vextari. Nobody move, John ordered. Guards raised their weapons, but Vorthal held up his hand. Hold, I wish to speak with this human. John kept his weapon trained on the commander. "I'm listening." "You are remarkable," Vorthal said. "No species has ever escaped the arena, let alone organized others to revolt." "We're not lab animals," John replied. "We're thinking beings with rights." Vorthal stepped closer. "Do you know why we collect specimens, human?" "For your sick hunting games," John spat. "No. The hunt is merely a test." Vorthal gestured to the screen showing the chaos on the station. "We seek species worthy of joining our galactic alliance. Species with the intelligence and adaptability to survive in a harsh universe." John lowered his weapon slightly. "You have a strange way of recruiting allies." "Strength must be tested," Vorthal explained. "For thousands of years, we've used the hunt to find worthy species. None have ever done what you did, turning prey into predator." Commander Vexlar stepped forward angrily. "This is absurd. They are inferiors, not potential allies." "Silence," Vorthal commanded. He turned back to John. "We offer you a place in our alliance. Your species has proven its worth." John looked at the aliens who had fought alongside him. Zictal, Pick, and dozens of others. "And what about them? Are they worthy too?" "They failed their tests," Vexlar sneered. "No," John corrected him. "You failed to see their worth. They worked together, communicated across species barriers, and outsmarted your best hunters. If that's not worthy, what is?" Vorthal studied John for a long moment. "You challenge our most basic beliefs, human." "That's what humans do," John replied. "We change things." Suddenly, Commander Vexlar lunged forward, grabbing a weapon from a nearby guard. "Enough of this nonsense." He aimed directly at John. Before anyone could react, John dropped to the floor and swept Vexlar's legs from under him. The commander fell hard, his shot going wild. John pinned him down, the captured Vexteri weapon now pressed against the commander's throat. "Like I said," John breathed heavily, looking into Vexlar's 6 surprised eyes. "We changed things." John kept Vexlar pinned to the floor as the other Vexteri watched in shock. No prey species had ever physically dominated one of their warriors before. "Stand down." "Commander," Council Member Vorthal ordered. "You have proven the human's point better than he could have himself." John released Vexlar and stood up, weapon still ready. "I want all humans released and safe passage home." "And what of the other species?" Vorthal asked. "They decide their own fate," John replied. "No more hunting, no more cages." Krozol studied John with new interest. "You care about other species beyond your own." "Fascinating." "It's called empathy," Susan said, entering the command center with her group. "Something your people could learn." Vorthal considered this for a long moment. "We have much to reconsider about our methods. Perhaps there are better ways to find worthy allies than through hunting." "You think?" John said with a hint of sarcasm. Alarms suddenly blared again. Krozol rushed to the controls. "The environmental systems are failing throughout the station. The power core is becoming unstable." "Can you fix it?" Vorthal demanded. "No," Krozol replied. "Too many systems were damaged during the escape. We need to evacuate." John looked at the screens showing different parts of the station. Fires had broken out in several areas, and barriers were failing. "Where are your ships?" he asked. "Docking Bay 3, Krozol answered. "But it's 5 levels down." John turned to his allies. "We need to move now. Gather everyone you can find and head to the docking bay." As they rushed through the corridors, the station shook violently. Parts of the ceiling fell around them. John helped a small alien child who had fallen behind. "Keep moving," he shouted as they reached a blocked passage. Zictal and 2 other strong aliens helped clear the debris. Behind them, Vexteri evacuation teams were also heading to the ships. When they finally reached the docking bay, chaos reigned. Vexteri crews were preparing ships for departure. Some were trying to keep other species from boarding. "Stop!" Vorthal's voice boomed across the bay. "All species board together." This is my command. John led his group toward a large transport ship. Commander Vexlar stepped in their way, his hand on his weapon. This ends now, Vexlar said. You may have impressed the council, human, but you have not convinced me. We don't have time for this, John replied. The station is falling apart. Then we will die together, Vexlar hissed. Susan raised her weapon, but John held up his hand. No, there's been enough fighting. He looked directly at Vexlar. We're not enemies unless you make us enemies. Your choice. Another explosion rocked the station. Vexlar looked around at the panicking crowds, then back at John. Slowly, he lowered his weapon. Board the ship, he said finally. But this is not over between us, human. Probably not, John agreed as they rushed past. As the transport ship filled with Vextari and former captives alike, John stood by the viewport watching the station begin to break apart. Beside him, Susan placed a hand on his shoulder. We did it, she said. We're going home. Some of us are, John replied, looking at the diverse beings that filled the ship. But where will they go? Vorthel approached them. We have made a decision. We will transport all species to safe worlds where they can thrive. And we would like to open proper diplomatic relations with Earth. As equals, John insisted. No more hunting, no more tests. As equals, Vorthel agreed. Your species has earned a new classification in our records. No longer prey, but adaptive apex, the only species to ever change its status. As the ship pulled away from the disintegrating station, Zictal and Pick joined John at the viewport. Together, they watched the stars stretch as the ship entered faster than light travel. What will Earth say when we arrive with an alien delegation? Susan wondered. They'll adapt, John smiled. That's what humans do best. In the ship's database, the Vextari classification for humans changed forever. Species once thought to be prey, now recognized as apex predators of the highest order, approach with caution and respect.